Hello friends, today we will learn how to write critical appreciation of the poem. Writing critical appreciation of the poem is a little bit difficult task, but if we have a proper mechanism, if we adopt proper techniques at the time of writing appreciation of the poem, then definitely this task can be done in a very successful manner. During this lecture, I will try to come across all your queries, your doubts, your questions, and we will make this task very smooth and very meaningful. Let's see, literature is the mirror of the society. When we go through the literature, we can understand, we can come across the prismatic reflection of the society in the literature. And because of that, we need to understand the literature in a true sense. And in that sense, the poetry is an expression of the sensitive mind, because it is being said that poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Therefore, we need to have proper mechanism to understand the sensitive mind of the poet, and because of that, it is being considered important literary genre. It has deeper connection with the various domains of the society, because poetry is nothing but it is the reflection of the people's mind, and because of that, it is very difficult to understand the poem in a true sense. And if we understand poetry in a true sense, then we can taste the music of the poetry in real way. At the time of writing critical appreciation, we need to identify different contexts with different domains. Poetry's connection with the culture. Culture is the dynamic concept, and if the poet addresses cultural things in the poem, that has to be identified. If poem addresses the philosophical base, that has to be investigated. Whether the poem explains the political reality, whether the poem talks about economic and social reality, if it underlines religious need of the society, or other literary devices, that has to be investigated in a very diligent way. And because of that, when we are trying to understand writing a critical appreciation of the poem, therefore it is being considered that it is a difficult, one of the difficult tasks in form of writing any kind of literature. So therefore, writing critical appreciation is difficult task, but if we have a proper mechanism, then task can be done in a very smooth manner. Let's see the difference between summary and critical appreciation. There is a difference between, it is visible difference. In case of summary writing, you don't require to give your opinions, give your perception, or it is about characters or story, events. It has just brief understanding about surface meaning of the poem. It gives a straightforward reflection of the thought process of the poem. So in case of summary writing, in case of the summary of the poem, it is a straightforward surface meaning of the poem. But in case of critical appreciation, it is absolutely opposite to summary writing. For writing critical appreciation, you should have a thinking process, that is critical thinking. You should have ability to understand the things in a different way. You should have different approaches. You should apply different theories. You should have a broader perspectives then you can understand inner theme of the poem, because poetry correlates with the political, economic and social scenario of the society, and for understanding that reality it is required to have a critical thinking, and that is the most important part for the writing of critical appreciation. Even in this part you have to assess the stanza pattern of the poem, whether the poet uses that particular literary devices for the enhancements of the text, so that you have to identify it. Then rhyming scheme, different rhyming scheme can be used by poet, idioms, these figures of speech, other literary devices, etc., that uses that has been used by the poet. And because of that, when we want to understand critical appreciation of the poem, it is required to have very good sound mind to understand the things in a true sense. Steps for the critical appreciation. Uh, there are two steps for critical appreciation, according to me. First step, in the first reading, you should understand the central idea of the poem. So, at the time of reading in the first time, you must underline the figures or speeches or few difficult or unusual technical terms or words. Possibly, it should be extensive reading of the poem. After understanding the central idea of the poem, you should you should prefer for second reading, because second reading is the most conscious reading to find out correlations of the poem in a true sense, because poetry has a deeper connections with different domains of the world. It 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 correlates with the different walks of the life, and because of that it is required to have second reading. In the second reading, even you can find out stanza pattern, rhyming schemes, poetic devices, etc. And therefore, when you would complete two steps, then you would able to identify writing of the questions in a true sense. And then you can write critical appreciation in a successful way. Couple of questions should be considered in your mind while making critical appreciation of the poem. The first question, it could be, what is the subject matter, content, message of the poem? That you have to write down. The second question, who is the speaker in the poem? What do you do make out of his or her attitude, mood, approach from your reading of the poem? Because sometimes the speaker is poet himself, sometimes a singular person, third person, any character, any human being, any animal. So that you have to identify, and that is the part of the critical appreciation of the poem. Second question would be, what are the character mentioned in the poem and what relationship do they share? Because characters, if any other characters are there, you have to identify it, you have to underline it, you have to find out relevance of that character in the poem, you have to identify the importance of that character in the poem. Next question, it it could be, what does the title imply? Is it appropriate enough? Because the most of time the title is irrelevant, or sometimes it is very subtle. It occupies the central idea of the poem, but in some cases, if the title of the poem is not suitable, so you can say that is your critical reflection. This title of the poem is not proper, and even you can suggest any appropriate title for the sake of broader meaning of that particular poem. And because of that, that title, whether title is proper, whether title is not proper, whether title requires certain modification, then that modification you can write on that at the time of writing critical appreciation. Second question would be, what is the geographical location implied, suggested, or described in the poem? If that location is related to the hilly areas, mountain areas, or any valleys, then that things you have to be mentioned at the time of writing critical appreciation. Does the poem refer to any specific period in history? What is the time frame of the poem? Archaic, modern, industrial, or contemporary? Does the poem move ahead in a time as it progresses forward, or does it go back in the past? And whether the poem represents ancient, medieval, modern, postmodern, post-truth, truth, whatever it is, that you have to identify, that you have to investigate it, and it has to be written at the time of writing critical appreciation of the poem. Next question, whether the is it a descriptive? In most of times the poet uses to write their feelings in a descriptive way. Sometimes they write in a reflective way. They try to suggest some philosophical reality of the society, and therefore their poems are reflective. In that case, you have to be very particular and you have to be very sincere in that sense, whether they have written in a reflective or conversational or narrative way, that you have to be understand, that you have to underline at the time of writing critical appreciation of the poem. Next question, what are the images used in the poem? What do they convey? Because images are important tools in hands of the poet uses it to create effectiveness in the composition of the poem. If that images have been used for broader understanding, that you have to dissect, you have to segregate, and you have to make its suitable discussion. Then what is the mood of given poem? Elegiac, reflective, dramatic, nostalgic, etc. Means the mood of the poet. Because sometimes poet is very happy mood, unhappy mood, reflective mood, elegiac, dramatic. That is means this is the area you have to investigate your findings, and then you can able to complete your task. Then has the poet used the figures of speech, exaggeration, personification, onomatopoeia, metaphor, simile, inversion, etc. And you try to find out the relevance of that figures of speech in the poem. And because of that, when you are understanding poem in a critical sense, then definitely you would get many explanation, and that is a very close reading. And I earlier already said that for writing critical appreciation, it is required to have a very close reading, and then you can able to go ahead with in a very successful manner, in a very proper manner. Generally we don't prepare vast reading, and therefore we fail to write critical appreciation of the poem in a true sense. Indeed, it is a difficult task, but if we have a very good mechanism, definitely that task can be done in a successful way. Let's move ahead. What kind of register is used in the poem? Formal, informal, archaic, or domain specific vocabulary? Register means the ability of the speaker to speak different languages at different places. For example, as a person, when I am at my home, I have to speak in a different tone, and even that person speaks when he is at home, he speaks in different tone, different language. But the same person when he comes at the railway stations and when he converse with strange person, his register, the style of language changes. When he's the in office, his communication language changes. The one person has a capacity to speak different languages at different place, that is called register, and that register you have to identify. If the poet has used a specific register, for example formal, informal, where the domain specific vocabulary has used by the poet, that you have to identify. Second thing, which type of sentences used by the poet predominate in the poem? That is simple sentences, complex sentences, compound sentences, active, passive, declarative, imperative, interrogative. That you have to identify, because these area, it is absolutely under the control of the poet, and poet can uses different strategies, different techniques for getting the poetry appealing one to the large section of the people. Therefore that area you have to identify. Therefore the sentences, whether the sentences are there, which type of sentences are there, what is the nature of that sentences, that you have to write. Then what kinds of verbs are used, dynamic or stative? Because verbs are important, but most of times they don't prepare with proper sentence construction. Subject plus verb plus object. This is the standard requirement for the sentence. But in case of poetry, poet doesn't follow that grammatical rules, and therefore that you have to identify. Then what kinds of adjective that used in the poem, that you have to identify. What types of nouns predominate in the poem, whether it is abstract noun, concrete noun, a countable noun, or collective noun, and what is the importance of that nouns in the poem, that you have to identify. In the you can you can understand that, is there any unfamiliar usage, deviation, foregrounding, does any keyword, phrase, sentence stands out, what is the impact on you? Because if you get impressed from the phrases or sentences from the poem, that you have to underline, that you have to write, because most of times one word or one sentence creates a very good sense, and if the sense making words or sentences are there, you have to underline it, you have to write in the critical appreciation. The next, what are the graphological features of the poem? Length of the lines, run on the lines, punctuation, and the use of uppercase letter, italics, bold letters. Is the length of the lines equal, uneven? Because if the poet has written in proper meter, then you can mention this poem has written. If you would able to identify the meter of the poem, then it is well and good. But the basic things, if it is example of run-on lines, if the punctuation marks has not used in a proper way, if bold letters used, italic letters used, uppercase letters used, then that you have to reflected in your writing. Then next question, what is the stanza pattern? Okay, means that is a typical requirement of the poem. If it is written in well meter, then definitely there is a proper stanza. But if it is written in free verse, then there is no stanza pattern in a true sense. So therefore that whatever it is, you have to identify true stanzas of the poem. The next question, most probably, is there a rhyming scheme? Rhyming scheme, we know that we will see in the example upcoming slides. So is there rhyming scheme? That the same sound making words are there, and if it has relevance in the poem, then definitely that rhyming scheme, whether it is proper rhyming scheme or internal rhyming schemes, that you have to identify it. Then how does the poem end? Is it surprise, is it conclusion, commentary, or summary of the content? That things you have to identify. Then next question, which are the consonants vowel used frequently in the poem? or what impact do they have on you. The vowel sound, consonant sound, if they have used, that you have to identify, and that is the part of our study. Let's see the example of the poem. I hope this is visible for you. You know that stopping by woods on a snowy evening. This poem has written by one of the famous poets, Robert Frost, and I will read this poem for you. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house in the village, though he will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep. A miles to go before I sleep. A miles to go before I sleep. In the first reading, we come to know the central idea of the poem, and that central idea is that in the snowy evening, poet is going with a horse, and they have stopped at unknown place, and that creates some kind of oddness in the behavior of the little horse. And even in the second line, that horse is giving signal that is it is not proper. Why did you stop here? And therefore that things, it is strange for the horse. And in the last stanza, that is the fourth stanza, woods are lovely, dark and deep, means their journey, they are going through woods, they are going through very vast, dark, deep forest. And I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. That person has made promises to someone. That person may be his relatives, his friend, his boss, whosoever is, but he had made promises with that persons, and because of that, he has to fulfill that promises. A miles to go before I sleep. Before that means he has to reach at their destination. Their destination is already decided, already determined, and for that journey they are prepared. So even though that evening is the darkest evening of the year, the still they have to reach at their place, because anyway, because promises cannot be broken. So for fulfilling the promises, they are going to reach there, and therefore this poem reflects very good understanding. In the second reading, if in the first reading we understand that, but second reading it should be for broader understanding, because the poet always try to say in a inner way. The poem's straightforward meaning is different, but inner meaning is different, and for that it is required to have second reading. Earlier already I explained that why the second reading is important. Second reading is a conscious reading. When you have some solid base in your mind, then definitely you try to find out different correlations with different domains of the society or even world. So therefore this has to be read in a second time. I hope assuming that I have read this poem a second time, in case of that we have seen that he gives his harness bells a shake. This is example of personification. The horse has given the human quality of promptness, because the horse is signaling something, and that signal, it is the work of the human quality. To prompt someone is the quality of human being, and that has attributed to the horse. And the second thing we can understand in the last stanza, means that is more philosophical, this stanza. This stanza says, woods, if we compare with the life, woods are lovely, means life is lovely, dark and deep, because we know that life is a very complicated phenomena, and no one understands the meaning of the life or central idea of the life, because life is mortal. Though there is no surety how long that person would survive. So we don't know what shall tomorrow bring for us. So when will, and always, because there is a full stop from nature's side, because the death is the ultimate reality of the human life. And when will that full stop comes from the nature side? So we never knows. And therefore, woods are lovely, dark and deep. I have two promises to keep. Means he has made promises to, earlier I told that maybe family members, maybe relatives, maybe their friends. So that promises, it should not be broken, and because of that he has to maintain trajectory of his life continuously and line this and miles to go before I sleep. Sleep, if we compared with the death, before my death, means life is very complicated, dark and deep, but I have to fulfill the promises which I made to my beloved. So that promises I have to fulfill before my death. So that kind of philosophical base it comes from the poem. So this is absolutely a very important poem in sense to understand this poem. Then we can find out the what you can rhyming words. Sorry, no, though, and snow. We can give A, B, A. What is the stanza pattern? A, B, A. Okay. So this is stanza. In second stanza, this is pure rhyming word, near and ear. So this is B, B, C, B. Okay. What is the stanza pattern of cure? Means B, means we have used here A, sorry, B. Even that comes here, cure, near, ear. Okay. A, B, B, C, B. Now, in next stanza, shake, mistake, and flake. Okay, this is C, C, D, C. Okay, these are the rhyming words. And now in the fourth stanza, dip, keep, sleep, and sleep, DDD. Means we can write in the poem, okay, this is the poem of four stanza, and that stanzas are important to understand. Therefore, when we understand the entire poem, we have understand the central idea of the poem, we have understand any figures of speech there, we understand allegory in the poem, images of the poem, we have understood the rhyming words. If there are internal rhymes that we can identify, means internal rhyme means the rhyming words in a sentences. So we don't find any internal rhyme or I rhyme in this poem, but just a proper rhyming words are there. Then we have seen a stanza pattern, we have seen other literary aspects. So definitely that aspects are useful to understand the central idea of the poem. So we'll go and what is means after that we can write a critical appreciation of the poem in a true way. Let's see how can write that critical appreciation. So critical appreciation of the poem. In this poem, a narrator, poet goes towards his unspecified destination along with a horse and halts at unknown place. It was unknown and unusual place, therefore horse might have thought it odd. It was a hilly area passing through mountain and it was completely shrouded by deep and dark forest. That night was the darkest night of the year. Because of that, it enhanced the effects of the darkness. It denotes that their destination is no certain, which causes the heat of the moment in the poem. Here, Woods has compared with the concept of life, and like Woods, life is also uncertain, deep and dark. An individual cannot able to find out successful path through the trajectory of the life. The last stanza of the poem tells universal truth underlining meaning of the life. Death is a universal phenomena and which is not under the control of anyone. Poet says, I have to keep promises before my sleep. It means he has to fulfill all his scheduled work or promises given to relatives, family members, friends, etc. before the death. Death is inevitable and we don't know when will it come. Therefore, it is the duty of individual to act promptly to complete unfinished tasks. In this poem, Woods has symbolically compared with life and sleep has used for the concept of the death. So this is the poem, critical understanding of the poem. Other literary aspects of the poem. In the first line of the third stanza, he gives Ernest Bell's is an example of personification. Horse has attributed human quality of prompting. In the poem, sound WH, yes, have been repeating. Watch his woods, sounds the sweep, his house are example of repetition. Line number 3, 5, 6, 7, 9 are enjambment line because we don't find any punctuation marks over there. Stanza pattern of the poem. First stanza AABA, second stanza BBCB, third CCDC, and fourth DDDD. Rhyming words from the poem: know, those, know, queer, near, ear, shake, mistake, flake, deep, keep, sleep. This is about critical appreciation of the poem. Always keep in your mind you must go with couple of questions, then you would able to understand real meaning of the poem. So don't expect answers of that questions. So whatever you received, whatever the things are there, you should collect in a form of writing, and ultimately that is called critical appreciation of the poem. And finally, thank you.